Is an individual shaped by their surroundings, or are their deeds a consequence of their personal decisions? Does the adage, "everything we possess in life, we either earned or permitted," hold true? What are your thoughts? On a gloomy evening in March 2010, paramedics were summoned to a residence in Escambia County, Florida. A 19-year-old lady had been subjected to a horrific assault. Her wounds were so grave that her skin had darkened and was literally sloughing off her frame. Despite her state, she succeeded in identifying the fiends who had savaged her in this manner. Tina Lasagna Brown was born in July 1970 to Lily and Willie Coleman, who had wed at a tender age. Shortly after Tina's arrival, her brother Willie Coleman Jr. was born just 11 months later. The youthful parents, owing to their immaturity, prioritized socializing over caring for their offspring. The children were frequently left unattended at home or sent to stay with relatives on weekends. Despite the minimal age gap, Tina assumed the role of caretaker for Willie Jr. She looked after her sibling, prepared meals, assisted with schoolwork, accompanied him to and from school, and brought him home after classes. Willie Sr. became involved with a gang and made a living peddling illicit drugs. In mid-1982, he viciously assaulted his wife Lily, after which she refused to continue residing with him under the same roof. She gathered her belongings, initiated divorce proceedings, and departed, leaving her 2 children in the custody of their tyrannical father without attempting to maintain any contact. Willie Sr. persisted in selling white powder directly from their residence, but with Lily gone, he began physically abusing his daughter. Unable to endure the prolonged harassment from an adult male, Tina sought refuge with her paternal grandmother. The girl felt secure and decided to disclose the abuse by Willie Sr., but instead of receiving support, the elderly woman unleashed her fury on the teenager and banished her from the house, insisting that her son would never engage in such behavior and forbidding Tina from appearing in her presence. With nowhere else to go, the girl returned to her father's house, and the assaults resumed. Subsequently, against the wishes of the entire family, Coleman Sr. married his beloved, an aggressive and promiscuous woman named Melinda. The abuse from her father ceased, but Willie Sr. grew dissatisfied with his new wife's infidelity, catching her in the arms of other men on multiple occasions. The household was consumed by turmoil, aggression, alcohol, and illicit substances. The father and stepmother indulged in them and even introduced Tina to the effects of psychotropic drugs. Melinda then coerced her stepdaughter into sleeping with men to earn money for alcohol and entertainment through the exploitation of her young body. Several years later, the FBI launched an investigation into Willie Sr.'s involvement in gang activities, leading to his arrest and a year-long prison sentence. During this period, Tina temporarily moved in with her mother, but due to the strict rules in Lily's household, constant arguments erupted between them, resulting in the girl being kicked out onto the streets once again. Friends, over 90% of viewers watch videos without subscribing to the channel. Check if you're subscribed. If not, please be so kind as to subscribe to the channel to support me. Tina moved in with her aunt. The teenager's upbringing was so inconsistent and unhealthy that she had difficulties in school, transferring between several educational institutions over a span of 4 years. Although Tina ultimately earned her diploma, it could not erase the years of mistreatment and degradation she had endured. Lacking a stable residence and grappling with drug addiction due to the influence of her wicked stepmother Melinda, the girl found herself in a dubious location inhabited by other young people in similar circumstances. There, Tina encountered Greg Miller, another individual battling synthetic substance addiction. Despite the volatile nature of their relationship, they remained together for an extended period. The woman gave birth to 2 children, but due to the mother's way of life, the children were afflicted with various ailments. During her 3rd pregnancy, Tina separated from Greg and found herself in a rehabilitation facility, where she gave birth to her 3rd child, Brittany Miller. Rather than placing her children in foster care, Tina agreed to undergo addiction treatment. She entrusted her first 2 infants to her mother Lily for adoption and, through rehabilitation, managed to retain custody of Brittany. The woman put forth her best efforts to be a nurturing mother and abstained from substance use for a total of 4 years. Throughout her own childhood, Tina had been deprived of love and affection from her parents, robbed of a carefree youth, so she resolved to do everything in her power to safeguard her own children. Tina met a new man and married him, but following the wedding, she was confronted with devastating news. Her husband had been arrested and imprisoned for selling and distributing illicit drugs. Tina secured employment as a bartender and once again encountered a young man who captured her attention. It seemed that the woman subconsciously gravitated towards men associated with the lifestyle she had renounced, as if drawn to temptation. Although Tina did her utmost to persevere, her life with this man was far from prosperous, marked by quarrels that escalated into violence and constant humiliation. The woman managed to break free from this oppression when her partner was also incarcerated. However, Tina struggled to manage her life and found herself without means of support. In desperation, she resorted to writing fraudulent checks, for which she was apprehended and faced criminal charges. Consequently, the woman turned to exotic dancing as a means to obtain some income. It was during this period that she relapsed, succumbing once more to substance abuse, fraudulent checks, promiscuous encounters, and another arrest. In 2005, when Tina was 35 years old, the court mandated that she undergo treatment. She endeavored to earn an honest living and secured a position as an assistant manager at a catering company. Everything seemed to be going well until another bout of depression and breakdown occurred. In the summer of 2009, Tina resolved to start anew. She relocated to Pensacola, Florida, found employment at a bakery, and settled into a mobile home park with her daughter, Brittany Miller. However, the income earned was insufficient to cover their expenses, so Tina gradually began offering intimate services in exchange for money. Her best friend Heather's husband was listed among her regular clients. Initially, Tina Brown and Brittany Miller shared a close bond with their neighbors, 27-year-old Heather Lee and 19-year-old Audreanna Zimmerman. Audreanna Zimmerman, born on April 13, 1990, had a childhood and youth shrouded in obscurity. Recently, she had been residing in a mobile home park in Pensacola, Escambia County, Florida. Despite her young age of 19, she was already a mother to 2 children, 2-year-old Trinity and 3-year-old David. As a single mother, she faced financial hardships, as raising and nurturing children required significantly more resources than living alone, and she had no one to rely on for support. Partners proved unreliable, so she turned to her nearest neighbors for assistance. Heather Lee and 39-year-old Tina Brown, along with her teenage daughter, 16-year-old Brittany Miller, became a lifeline for the young mother to some extent. Regrettably, living in such an environment leaves an indelible mark on a person. The reasons that lead individuals to reside in mobile homes often stem from their past experiences, which are rarely positive. The absence of stability and a supportive social circle can result in disagreements between neighbors, escalating beyond verbal altercations and culminating in violence. Commonplace conflicts frequently spiral into something sinister, as individuals leading such a lifestyle may exhibit a total lack of control over their behavior, a prevalent occurrence in this particular setting. At the time, the 4 neighbors had highly volatile relationships. Minor squabbles that escalated into physical altercations could not foster the development of a strong friendship. Grievances accumulated, accusations against one another intensified, and at times, the arguments became so extreme that police intervention was necessary. The majority of the disputes revolved around men. Audreanna was infuriated with Tina, who, following one of the neighbors' disputes, reported to the Florida Department of Children and Families that Audreanna was not providing adequate care for her children. Audreanna was well aware of the potential consequences of the guardianship authorities intervening in her personal life. This would inevitably lead to inspections by the authorities, and if they found anything unsatisfactory, they could easily remove the children from her custody, which was the worst nightmare for any parent. What made the situation even more distressing was that Audreanna had only recently considered Tina her closest friend. For understandable reasons, the young mother was furious, and the neighbors once again found themselves embroiled in conflict. The subject of the dispute now extended beyond the upbringing of children to encompass minor grievances and resentments, and the most frightening aspect was that they snowballed with each passing minute. The third neighbor, Heather Lee, made numerous attempts to act as a mediator between them, but all her efforts proved futile. Audreanna accused Tina of meddling in affairs that did not concern her, holding her responsible for the arrest of Audriana's boyfriend. Tina had also allegedly shattered the window of her car. Naturally, Tina did not remain silent in response. She countered with an accusation that the young neighbor had slashed her car tires in the past, prompting her to retaliate by breaking the window. The most recent altercation between the former friends revolved around Brittany's boyfriend. Tina's 16-year-old daughter had somehow discovered that Audreanna had slept with her boyfriend, and as soon as the opportunity for revenge presented itself, the girl attacked Audreanna and attempted to strike her. In response, Audreanna utilized a stun gun. This incident was particularly severe, even for a mobile home park, and once again highlighted the level of well-being in the area. In general, disagreements frequently arose between Audreanna and Brittany. Both girls were essentially still teenagers, despite the fact that one of them was a mother of two. Neither of them possessed the ability to control their emotions and outbursts of rage, which is why the other neighbor, Heather Lee, often had to intervene in their conflicts and break up fights. When Tina learned that her child had been assaulted with a stun gun, she was consumed by anger and resolved not to leave the incident unpunished. There was a clear course of action to address the situation, to involve the police, but Brown, who had suffered abuse from her own father and stepmother during her childhood, was not one to forgive offenses. She decided to take matters into her own hands and exact retribution. Several days passed, but the stun gun incident continued to fester. The thoughts of both mother and daughter remained fixated on seeking revenge against Audreanna. On March 24, 2010, Tina invited Audreanna to her trailer under the pretense of arranging a truce and rekindling their friendship. She decided to set aside all grievances and put an end to the feud. Audreanna was overjoyed, as she had been feeling utterly isolated in her mobile home. She genuinely believed that it was time to cease quarreling and fighting over trivial matters, as they had managed to maintain a friendship and support each other for a period. Thus, the young woman agreed to visit the trailer, unaware of the trap she was about to walk into. Tina, Heather, Brittany, and her 13-year-old friend Mallory were already gathered in the house, awaiting Audreanna's arrival. Brown had decided to employ the same weapon that the neighbor had used against her daughter. She had deliberately concealed a stun gun in advance within one of the cabinets. Brittany informed her friend that they intended to confront Audreanna for all the offenses inflicted upon them. And if Mallory divulged this information to anyone, she would be next, clearly indicating premeditation on Brittany's part. While it is possible that Audreanna had indeed engaged in an intimate relationship with Brittany's boyfriend, provided inadequate care for her children, and perpetrated petty tricks on her neighbors, she was only 19 years old and certainly did not deserve to die. Unaware, around 9 p.m., Audreanna visited the neighboring trailer and within minutes found herself collapsed on the ground after multiple strikes from a stun gun. Unbelievable, intense agony pierced through her entire being, immobilizing her muscles and plunging her into utter terror. The understanding that she was utterly defenseless and powerless compelled the girl to cry out. Audreanna pleaded for assistance, realizing that something truly horrific was about to unfold. Heather Lee came to the aid, but she was assisting not the victim, but the tormentors. The neighbor stuffed a filthy sock into Audreanna's mouth to silence her, while Brittany simultaneously delivered a forceful blow to her face, after which the captive was hauled outside and thrown into the vehicle's trunk. Tina took the driver's seat, and her daughter and neighbor Heather entered the passenger section. 13-year-old Mallory remained in the trailer. Having driven approximately 1.5 miles from the mobile home park, the women reached a spacious glade in a forested region. Audreanna, lying unconscious in the trunk, started to realize that if she didn't escape immediately, the situation could end tragically for her. As soon as the trunk was opened, Audreanna fled from the trio with all her might. She had already begun to rejoice that she had escaped in time when, as misfortune would have it, she stumbled on a tree root and tumbled to the earth. It was already dark, and moreover, Audreanna was in great haste, so she failed to notice the obstruction in her path. Tina and Brittany swiftly caught up to her and commenced the assault right there. The mother again employed a stun gun, while the daughter grabbed a crowbar. Afterward, they exchanged weapons, allowing themselves to torment the overpowered neighbor in various ways. Evidently, these actions brought delight to the two women. When the tool slipped out of Brittany's grasp, she struck Audreanna multiple times with her fist with such force that she fractured her finger. Meanwhile, Tina went to the vehicle's trunk, retrieved a gasoline canister, and returned to the beaten, prone, but still conscious body of the neighbor. Tina could clearly see the severity of Audreanna's injuries and how terrified she was, but it seemed insufficient to her. Although, subsequently, what Audreanna did was incomparable to what they were doing now. Nevertheless, Tina drenched Audreanna's body with gasoline, ignited a lighter, and set her ablaze. And then all three attackers observed as the fire raged, as the girl screamed from unimaginable agony, and how her skin charred. At one point, Brittany even leaped up and down with excitement, yelling, "Burn, bitch!" It's even difficult to fathom that someone could experience joy witnessing such a horrific, excruciating act. Most individuals possess empathy and compassion, but Brittany Miller was apparently not one of them. When Audreanna's body was consumed by the inferno, she remained aware. She was positioned prone as the combustible liquid was poured over her. During the pinnacle of her agonizing torment, she commenced rolling on the earth, seeking to alleviate her anguish, while Heather, Tina, and Brittany nonchalantly entered their vehicle and returned to their residence, anticipating the swift demise of their neighbor. During the journey back to their mobile home, Brittany recalled leaving some belongings at the location, including a taser and a pair of her athletic shoes. She informed her mother, but Tina insisted they would not return. She desired to put some space between them and the actual offense. Tina failed to realize that the discarded items would serve as evidence, primarily indicating their participation. She was simply incapable of coherent reasoning. Despite the women's belief that they had meticulously planned and considered every detail, their actions suggested disarray and a total absence of control over the circumstances. Perhaps they doubted anyone would be concerned about Audreanna Zimmerman's destiny or uncover the reason for her passing. If they, her closest neighbors, regarded her as a disposable object, discarded her like rubbish, and incinerated her, why would others be troubled by her disappearance? It was their underestimation of the girl's identity that led to the subsequent outcome. Remarkably, despite the horrific, life-threatening wounds, Audreanna somehow managed to douse the flames, rise, and trek approximately a mile until she reached the closest residence. This dwelling belonged to a man named Terrence Hendrick. That night, he intended to retire early when he thought he heard a faint voice in the yard pleading for assistance. Terrence peered out the window but could not discern anyone in the darkness. Intrigued by the unanticipated visitor, the man stepped onto the porch and gazed into the distance. After a moment, once his eyes adjusted to the absence of light, Hendrick could distinguish the silhouette of a person approaching him. The unfamiliar figure moved as if in slow motion. Terrence immediately realized that someone was in distress and now attempting to seek help. This individual was gravely injured. It was astonishing that the homeowner even heard the voice, as now, standing mere feet from the stranger outside, he could not comprehend a single word. It was revealed to be Audreanna Zimmerman, the girl, who, overcoming the pain, whispered for him to summon emergency services and, unable to remain standing, collapsed on the porch. Hendrick grabbed the phone and settled beside her on the steps. As the girl swayed from side to side, arms extended in front of her, he called 911 and informed the dispatcher that a woman requiring immediate hospitalization had just emerged from the woods near his home. As they sat on the porch awaiting the arrival of the paramedics, Terrence observed that she had a severe head injury. The girl's body appeared entirely black, and it was unclear whether she was wearing any clothing, as it was impossible to distinguish between her skin and any fabric. She emitted a strong odor of burning and gasoline. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this video. It's really important. The emergency personnel who arrived shortly thereafter were perplexed by the sight of such horrific burns. To their dismay, they realized that their abilities were too limited to alleviate Audreanna's agony in any way. According to rough estimates, approximately 90% of her body was severely burned. Her skin was literally peeling off like a charred piece of paper. She had an extensive head injury, and her jaw was either fractured or dislocated. The medics attempted to treat the skin with oxygen and apply a sterile dressing, but due to the severity of the burns, they lacked sufficient materials to cover the entire body. It was also impossible to stabilize her neck, as the skin began to disintegrate at the slightest touch. It is absolutely inconceivable how Audreanna managed to traverse such a distance at all, with such extensive burns. It is even impossible to fathom the excruciating pain she endured. However, despite all the injuries, Audreanna was conscious and able to communicate to some extent. She had a goal to inform people who had done this to her. The girl sensed that she could lose her mind at any moment, so she managed to provide the ambulance physician with all the details, knowing that her days were numbered and she needed to have time to take care of her little ones and bring the perpetrators to justice. The girl stated that she was struck with a stun gun, dragged out of the house, then hit on the head with a crowbar, after which she was doused with gasoline and set ablaze. Furthermore, she provided the names of all those who had tortured her, gave their addresses, and also requested protection for her children. Even in this condition, Audreanna was thinking about her little ones. This undoubtedly characterized her as a caring mother. And even though she made many mistakes in life, her love for Trinity and David was unwavering. While the girl was being transported to the hospital, she repeatedly asked the doctors if they would be able to save her, and again explained that she went to the trailer where the trap was waiting for her only to reconcile with the neighbors. Unfortunately, the doctors could not promise the impossible, but they assured Audreanna that they would do everything in their power. At the local hospital, Audreanna's condition was stabilized. The doctors induced an artificial coma, and then the victim was airlifted to the University of South Alabama Burn Center in Mobile. The investigators arrived at the scene relatively swiftly. It did not take them long to locate the wooded area where the attack on Audreanna occurred. The police walked from Terrence's house, where the girl sought help, along a dirt path and discovered the remains of a fire. There were more than enough clues around. A pair of white shoes, a strand of hair, a crowbar, a stun gun. There was also a pool of blood, a scrap of paper with red spots, and the remnants of burnt clothing. While the doctors were fighting to save Audreanna's life, and the police were searching for evidence of the crime, Tina, Brittany, and Heather returned to Tina's home, where 13-year-old Mallory was waiting for them. They removed their bloody clothes and shoes and concealed them in a garbage bag. Brittany informed her friend that she had broken her arm while beating Audreanna, so the girls took her mother's car and headed to the hospital. Meanwhile, Tina disposed of the bag containing the bloody clothes by tossing it into a dumpster. When the investigators arrived at the trailer park, they discovered two women in Heather Lee's residence and escorted them to the sheriff's office for questioning, and they apprehended Brittany slightly later when she returned from the hospital. Tina claimed that she had been watching movies all night at her friend Heather's house, and that she and Audreanna had indeed reconciled the previous night because there was a misunderstanding between them. But this was all the typical atmosphere of a trailer park, where neighbors periodically quarrel and even fight among themselves. Then, sensing something was amiss, Tina began to imply that Heather Lee frequently verbally abused Audreanna, which she had witnessed. When asked to recount the events of that night, Tina adamantly maintained that she had been watching movies all night until the officers arrived in the morning and requested her to accompany them to the station. Heather was interrogated separately from Tina. The woman denied any involvement in the assault on Audreanna and insisted that she had been cooking fish at home that night. Tina allegedly did visit her, but then returned to her own house, and when she came back, she was behaving oddly, pointing to the window and stating that the cops had arrived at the park. The detectives attempted to turn the two neighbors against each other, but they never admitted to anything. After being photographed and providing a DNA sample for analysis, they were both released. On March 26th, the police seized Tina Brown's vehicle for forensic examination. Inside, they managed to discover several drops later identified as Audreanna's blood. Audreanna's DNA was present on the crowbar, on the handle of the stun gun, as well as on the shoes left at the scene and belonging to Brittany Miller. A strand of hair had fallen out of Tina's hairstyle. During this time, Tina contacted her friend Paloma Velli and informed her about what they had done to Audreanna. Tina was aware that Audreanna was still alive and in the hospital, so she asked Pamela if she could complete what they had started and send her to the other world. Pamela declined, and then reached out to the authorities and reported the conversation. Now the police had everything they needed to file charges. On April 9th, 2010, Tina, Brittany, and Heather were arrested. This occurred on the very day that Audreanna Zimmerman tragically succumbed to her injuries. The young woman had battled for her life for 16 days following that brutal attack. When the pathologist performed an autopsy to determine the primary cause of death, it was found to be multiple thermal injuries. The only part of the body not affected by the fire was the right ankle and calf. The coroner also discovered numerous blunt force injuries and a laceration on the right side of the skull, which led to internal bleeding. In 2011, Heather Lee actually pleaded guilty to a second-degree felony, agreeing to a deal with the police. She testified against Tina and Brittany to avoid a harsher punishment herself. During interrogations, the woman wept and described how well she treated Audreanna and how she was concerned about her well-being. Heather testified in court, explaining that their intention was only to physically teach Audreanna a lesson, but the situation rapidly escalated out of control. Heather did not participate in the assault at all. She was an unwilling witness who attempted to intervene. It all began with a dispute between Tina and Audreanna and culminated in burning in the forest. In exchange for her confession, Heather Lee was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Tina, on the other hand, continued to maintain her own version that she had been watching movies all night, and therefore she had to face a jury trial. In June 2012, Tina Brown's trial commenced. Several individuals testified as witnesses, including Tina's cellmate, whom she confided in, and recounted the story of Audreanna's massacre. Mallory, Brittany's friend who was present in the trailer during the attack, was also summoned. The girl revealed what she was afraid to report even to her loved ones, as she was intimidated by a similar fate. Of the three attackers, Mallory identified Tina as the most brutal and aggressive. It was this woman that she feared the most. After the crime occurred before her eyes, she genuinely feared for her life. Tina's lawyers, as a mitigating factor, attempted to discuss Tina's challenging childhood filled with deprivation. They emphasized that the consequences of childhood traumas had an impact on her entire life. The defense managed to obtain witness testimony from the defendant's sons, her brother, and other relatives. However, a medical examination revealed that at the time of the crime, Tina acted purposefully and logically. No mental illnesses capable of clouding the mind and turning off the intellect were found in her. The woman had a clear understanding of what she was doing and did not experience any emotional turmoil simultaneously. After deliberation, the jury found Tina Brown guilty of a first-degree felony and recommended a death sentence. Their opinion was unanimous, particularly due to the disgusting, brutal, and cruel nature of the crime. It was stated that the aggravating circumstances outweighed the mitigating ones. Tina Brown apologized to Audreanna's family and admitted that she indeed participated in taking Audreanna's life, which she did not deserve. Despite the fact that 3 individuals participated in the massacre of Audreanna, they were all in different positions. Brittany Miller was under 18 at the time of the crime. By law, she could not be sentenced to death, so she received a life sentence. The sentence can be reviewed after serving 15 years in prison. This does not mean that she will ever be released, but at least she has an opportunity to reconsider her life and start anew, unlike her mother, Tina Brown, who raised her daughter to be like herself. This is the end of the story. Like the video and leave your thoughts in the comments.